call to action. Across Israel, a general strike or national day of protest. They came in their thousands, beginning at 6:29 a.m., the exact time that the deadly attack of October the 7th began. Among them, teachers, tech workers, retailers. And outside the Israeli Medical Association, the symbolic white coats of hospital workers. You're a GP, so why are you here today?
We see the suffering of our people in Gaza and the suffering of the children and women in Gaza. So we come to stand. I think that most of the people in Israel want that this war will end as soon as possible.
Do you feel that your government will listen? Will any of this make a difference?
I don't know.
Opinion polls do show that the majority of Israelis want an end to the war and the return of the hostages. But how to achieve that is still deeply divisive, as we found. I have 2 children in the army in Gaza, shouts this man, when protesters try to demand he stops his car and join them. Facing down this bus, I meet Idit Suslik, a dance teacher.
The sole purpose of this war is to keep Netanyahu in his seat as Prime Minister and to realize some kind of insane Messiah plan to reconquer Gaza. The hostages have to come home. We will not be able to recuperate as a society without these 50 people.
Netanyahu argues that the quickest way to end the war is his plan to go in hard.
No, he's actually misleading the Israeli public.
But even as they demonstrated, their Prime Minister was pressing ahead with his plan to forcibly displace 1 million people from Gaza City to camps in the south. He had this defiant message for those who joined the strike.
Those who are calling today for an end to the war without the defeat of Hamas are not only strengthening Hamas and delaying the release of our hostages, they are also ensuring that the horrors of October 7th will repeat themselves over and over again, and that our sons and daughters will have to fight over and over again in an endless war.
The general strike was called by bereaved families, survivors of the attacks, and relatives of the 50 hostages still being held, 20 of whom are believed to still be alive. Vicky Cohen's son Nimrod is a soldier who was just 19 when he was kidnapped.
I know he is isolated and up deep in the tunnels, but I hope that maybe some of what's going on here in Tel Aviv and in all Israel, he will see it, and maybe somebody will tell him about it, because I think it will give him a lot of hope. And that's what he needs to survive this hell, hope.
Do you feel that the government will listen?
I hope so. The only thing we can do good for the both sides, for the Palestinians and for the Israeli people, is to stop the war.
The rage that's been ignited here is spreading, but so far there's no sign that the government is listening.
Darsh Nassani reporting from Tel Aviv. Well, what about Gaza? A short time ago, I spoke to Palestinian political commentator Yara Hawari, who's in Cyprus at the moment. She's co-director of Al-Shabaka, a Palestinian think tank. I asked her what news she had of the humanitarian situation in Gaza right now.
Most people are still facing acute levels of hunger. Thousands of children are still deeply malnourished. You know, when people have been starved for so long, it takes more than just, a few meals to make them better. Starvation has lasting consequences on the body, and particularly so on children, and especially young children, both physical and cognitive consequences.
What do you make of this Israeli plan to send in tents, etc.?
What's the point of sending in tents when you're also bombing those tents? I mean, it's actually, I think, quite perverse and quite sick. What we're seeing actually now unfold on the ground is these plans by the Israeli regime that they have long said that they want to carry out, which is the occupation of Gaza. And we're seeing, because of this intense bombardment and shelling of Gaza City, we're seeing that actually being enacted in real time.
So Netanyahu has obviously said that one of the war aims is to return the hostages eventually. In your understanding, is there any view from Palestinians that if the hostages were returned, that the war would in fact end?
No, absolutely not. I think, Palestinians know full well what Netanyahu wants out of this genocide, because he's been promising it to his supporters all along, that he will occupy Gaza, he will take Gaza, and he's inspired by this sort of messianic vision of a greater Israel that will eventually extend into the neighboring Arab countries, not just the whole of historic Palestine. And the shocking thing is that he's been saying this consistently for so long, and by and large, the Western world is refusing to listen to him.
There are hundreds of thousands of Israelis protesting today. There are many Israelis who say that they don't want to see Palestinians annihilated. Why can't Hamas release the hostages?
I think it's very clear that those protests are about how Netanyahu is conducting the war, not if the war should be happening in the first place. And we've seen many polls over the last few years that show that the majority of Israelis actually support the ethnic cleansing of Gaza and the continuation of the bombardment of Gaza. So I don't think that's accurate that Israelis are not interested in the ethnic cleansing and the erasure of Palestinians. And we can see that even by the slogans and by the speeches that are happening at these protests. It's more about how Netanyahu is conducting the war, but also
But that doesn't justify the hostages being kept, does it?
No, I was addressing the protests, and the question was about what is going on with these protests. And in my view, and in the view of so many others, these protests are about how Netanyahu is conducting the war, and the fact that Netanyahu is considered a very corrupt leader by Israelis themselves. He's being investigated and taken to court for corruption. So that's how I read these protests, as opposed to being protests against a genocide.
Yara Hawari from the Al Shabaka network, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you for having me on.